I can't imagine who has the capacity to be this evil, to be this inhumane.
A brutal killing.
It was something I've never seen in 36 years. The dismemberment was almost done surgically.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
Right away, it gets you thinking along the lines of a serial murderer.
If you looked at his eyes, you could tell that he was a psychopath.
Anybody that she had contact with that night could have killed her.
The truth will be revealed.
This was truly a whodunit.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Manchester, New Hampshire, a blue-collar former mill town threaded with waterways.
The Piscataqua River flows into the Merrimack River. The two do connect in almost the center of Manchester. There's homes along the river. There's an old railroad trestle that kids would use to jump off of and jump into the water in the summertime.
But one summer's day, something disturbing emerges from the depths.
Several swimmers were out there, and one in particular swam up to what he thought was a bag.
It was so out of place that this person decided to look at it.
He looked inside and thought what he saw was a body of a small child or an infant.
These people were just horrified.
Detective Lieutenant Mark Putney and Detective James Susi are immediately called to the scene.
All your adrenaline and everything just kicks in. And I flew over to the west side, to the Piscataqua River, expecting to find a baby inside of a bag. When I opened the bag, the first thing I saw was a torso of a woman.
Headless, armless, and no legs, face down at the time.
It was obvious to us that she had been dismembered. It was something I've never seen in 36 years, and I've investigated probably over 50 homicides, so it was very disturbing.
Who could do something like this to another human being?
Things start running through your mind as to, what happened and who is this person.
Without the head, it becomes much more difficult to identify somebody because you don't have any dental records, you don't have any basis of comparison.
We knew we need to start conducting a search. The water, the trestle, the walkways, the marsh, the entire area, in hopes to find the remaining body parts.
You're obligated to search as much as you can for body parts. I mean, that brings closure to the family on one side, but also may provide evidence.
When we didn't find the rest of the body, we assumed that it happened at some other location and the body was dumped there. So now our crime scene really went citywide. We didn't have any idea where this happened.
An examination of the torso yields a key detail.
She had a tattoo on her right shoulder that had the first name of Mary.
They immediately cross-reference the name with the town's recently disappeared and get a hit.
Mary Stetson was reported missing that morning by her oldest daughter, Tamara.
And they came and picked us up, and we went down to the station. It was weird because I was sitting in the car and I seen a helicopter up in the sky and people heading over towards the water where we live. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
There's no delicate way to tell someone that their mother was dismembered. You have to just explain it. And yeah, it's something that you don't forget.
To find out it was my mother's torso. It's just disgusting. It made me sick. That's when my life changed,
It's a horrific crime. And to know that she had 5 children, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's something that, will stay with me the rest of my life.
Mary Stetson was described as a wonderful mom, somebody who was a good provider.
My mother was working at a cable company. She would work 40, 50 hours a week. She was tall, long legs, just beautiful, inside and out.
Her oldest daughter, Tamara, gave information that her mother had gone out on the night of the 18th, and that since that night, her mother never returned home. She said that was very unusual. She was last seen at 5:45 on the 18th and discovered on the 20th.
Creating a timeline is critical to any police investigation. Without a timeline, it's often difficult, if not impossible, for police to create a suspect list, and it makes it almost impossible for murder to be solved.
From the moment she was killed into the moment she was disposed of was probably over a 24-hour period. We determined that the death probably occurred late on the 18th, early on the 19th.
Narrowing it down further will prove a challenge.
When finding a body in water, it can prove difficult in determining cause of death and time of death. Being submerged in water may accelerate the internal changes in the body and cause decomposition at an advanced rate than it would outside the water. You also may have fish plucking out the hair and taking pieces of skin off the body. You also may have artifact from motorboats. The propeller can make deep cuts in the body to make it look like there was stabbing or cutting before they died.
But the injuries to Mary's torso point to something far more deliberate.
The medical examiner of New Hampshire did an autopsy, and he was able to determine that she died of multiple stab wounds, I think 12 to be specific, to her chest cavity. That tells me that somebody was very angry, extremely upset, and determined to kill this person, that it wasn't something that was an accident or a random act.
It clearly seemed like it was a personal attack. Something, I think we would characterize as, vicious, evil.
The frenzy of that attack contrasts with what the killer does next.
The dismemberment was almost done surgically. The cuts were very clean, right through the flesh and right through the bone. It didn't look like it was done by, to me, an amateur.
What that says about the mindset of the person is that they have this willingness not only to kill, but to get up close and personal and chop somebody into little bits.
You're already looking for a certain type of person. It takes a lot of strength, even if you know what you're doing. So the person you look for is likely male. That could be someone in the medical profession. That could also be someone who is a butcher.
We were looking for someone who had the capacity and the knowledge to dispose of a body, to throw off investigators, to both the victim and the suspect. And also someone who was so completely evil and depraved that could do something like this to another human being. It gets you thinking along the lines of a serial murderer.
One of the first things we did in this case was reach out to other police departments to see if they had any similar crimes in other jurisdictions.
So we were looking for a similar pattern.
There were no other cases that matched this case.
Detectives shift the focus to Mary's relationships to locate anyone she had contact with prior to her murder.
Most murders are committed between people who know each other in one capacity or another, and I call them crimes of passion.
We really needed to uncover every corner and lift up every stone and specifically get into the details of her life and what she was about and who she socialized with.
They turn to Mary's 22-year-old daughter, Tamra.
My mother talked to my father, but he lived all the way in Louisiana.
Her ex-husband wasn't a suspect. It was a very friendly relationship.
But the family can point them to someone who connects directly to Mary's timeline.
On the 18th, in the afternoon, she was supposed to go out with a guy named Chris.
And he never showed, and she was ready to, go out and have a good time. My mother wasn't the type to wait around. She's like, it's my Sunday. Hey, I'm leaving. She left the house at 5:45 in a taxi cab.
Mary's date then shows up less than an hour after she leaves the house.
It was a very quick conversation. Is your mother here? Is Mary here? And she said no, she had left. And the person said okay and left.
This unknown person is not somebody that she frequents with or socializes with. It was somebody that was new.
Our focus at this point was trying to identify the date. We don't know what that relationship was like. We don't know what happened after they left, if they did meet up. We don't know if they went to his apartment or a hotel or anywhere. Potentially, there could have been some type of argument where it could turn violent.
Detectives looking for Mary Stetson's murderer have their first suspect, a man they know only as Chris.
The family provided us the description of the person that showed up at her home. He was a white male. He had blue eyes and blonde spiked hair, slender build. We brought in a forensic artist and sat down with her. She was able to provide us a sketch of who this person was.
So we take the composite sketch and we wanted to get this information out so that we could start generating tips.
When you're dealing with homicide, the media is your friend. As much as they want information from you to make the 6 o'clock news, you need them to also get messages out to your witnesses, maybe to your suspect.
But I just didn't like the fact that she was all over the place. Didn't sit well with me at all.
The composite sketch is widely distributed, but Mary's date does not come forward.
We had no one that jumped out at us and said that, you need to take a real hard look at this person. It was very disappointing because here's somebody that was knocking at Mary's door 2 days before she's discovered, and for the person not to come forward immediately was very concerning to us. This person seemed as if it just dropped off the face of the earth.
Police move on to examine the next stage in Mary's timeline.
Mary was picked up by a local cab from her Kimball Street address and was taken downtown to a local bar.
We conducted an in-depth interview with that driver who confirmed that he had dropped her off, and he in fact saw her leave the cab and walk towards the bar. Mary arrived at the bar at approximately 6 p.m. in the evening.
It's a popular joint on Lake Avenue.
That was my mother's spot. She loved it there.
We had gone in there with her picture. We showed it around to the different patrons that were there, to the bartender. We learned that Mary had some drinks. We learned that somebody saw her with someone.
You now have a connection to a person and your victim. And certainly the theory is that, during that interaction, something went wrong for whatever reason, and then it becomes violent, which certainly happens in relationships.
Detectives compare the man's description with the one they have for Chris.
Chris had short, blonde, spiked hair, blue eyes. This individual that was seen with Mary had brownish hair, was a little older, so that it didn't match. So now we're trying to establish who this person is that was with Mary, and we're also still trying to find out who Chris was.
It certainly is frustrating when the information that you're looking for that you think is taking you in one direction, and then suddenly you're getting different information that's making you hang a left and head in another direction.
They search for any detail that could help them identify Mary's killer.
We started to speak with people inside the bar, and they brought up this one point during the evening. There was a male party who was different than Chris, had apparently purchased this teddy bear from another individual.
And the person that was with Mary, he was trying to warm up to her and bought the teddy bear for $5 and gave it to Mary.
One of the things that stood out was this particular teddy bear only had one eye on it. Several people had indicated that they thought it was unusual. It was just another a piece of the puzzle that we were trying to put together.
The canvas also helps detectives hone in on the time of the murder.
Mary was seen leaving the bar sometime around 11 p.m. that night.
At that point, Mary's trail runs cold. Aiming to generate new leads, they look further back in her timeline.
The family told us earlier that day that she had been to this market, which was in the neighborhood. And there was the store manager, Eddie, who worked inside this place.
I didn't care for Eddie. I thought he was very sketchy, weird. You know, how you get vibes from certain people, and he was one of them.
Allegedly, this was no shopping trip.
One of her daughters had indicated that she had an issue with Eddie. Her daughter would work there part-time and stock some shelves, and that he had made an inappropriate comment to her, and that he may have inappropriately touched her.
My mother found out about it and was really, really livid.
It's a very volatile situation when someone has a revelation that their daughter has been possibly molested.
I wondered if he had something to do with her disappearance.
Did Mary go back to the store, confront Eddie, and Eddie became so upset, killed Mary?
An alleged confrontation between Mary Stetson and a store manager named Eddie sparks the interest of detectives.
Based on what Mary's daughter told us, we were concerned. Eddie could possibly be a suspect here. The detectives went there and they spoke to him. They tried to get an alibi from him, what he did that night, get a timeline.
He did say that Mary had been there on the 18th, and she did confront him about these allegations, and they had a discussion. He described it as a bit heated. He denied having anything take place. Everything was on the up and up, and eventually Mary left the store, according to him. Eddie had closed the store at 11 o'clock.
He said he left and gave another employee a ride home, and he went home.
To verify Eddie's claim, they questioned the man he says was in his vehicle that night.
Billy Johnson was another employee in the store. He was a bit of a transient, too. I believe he may have even stayed from time to time in the basement of that place.
Rather than providing clarity, Billy's statement confuses the picture even further.
He said when Mary had stopped in and he had asked her about what she was doing later, and she may have been a little flirtatious, she had suggested that she may stop back between 10 and 11.
We had known that Mary was kind of a social butterfly, so it wasn't really all that unusual for her to agree to go out on a date. But the contradiction that we faced was the fact that she went to the store to confront Eddie about these allegations of sexual assault against her daughter. And while she's there, during some time frame, she has interaction with Billy, and she agrees that she's gonna have some kind of date with him later on in the evening. It just, you know, it didn't add up, it didn't make much sense.
As they probe deeper, allegations surface that may explain the contradiction.
People in the neighborhood said that Billy was a daily alcohol consumer, and he'd have these spans of time that he couldn't remember or just didn't make sense. When you're talking to somebody like that, you don't know what they remember and what they don't remember.
Then, they discover something even more disturbing.
We found that Billy worked in a butcher shop and was familiar with the process. When you hear about what took place and you see the manner in which the death occurred, you put two and two together and you say to yourself, this guy certainly has the potential to be a good suspect.
With conflicting accounts of Mary's actions, police want to see exactly what happened in the store.
There was CCTV video, and the camera wasn't working that night.
That clearly did send up a flag that, you know, was it just coincidental? Was it on purpose? Did Eddie create a malfunction with these cameras to hide something from the police? Certainly there was a potential for a motive, for, you know, something bad happening. Either Eddie or Billy or both having the potential or even the capacity to do this crime and having the MO for our murderer. If we had more concrete evidence from this closed-circuit TV, if we've seen Mary arrive, I mean, that could really turn into something else. Unfortunately, we didn't have that evidence. So we have to work hard to corroborate their stories and see if they have any alibis that fit. We couldn't connect Mary to Eddie because his alibi was locked up by the fact that he closed the store and he was seen by his family in another location on the same time frame that Mary had been seen in the downtown area.
Billy was living with somebody at the time when we spoke to that person, and we were able to alibi him that he did come home and never went back out. That whole scenario of the camera not working, I think, was legitimate.
To be certain, detectives perform a search for physical evidence.
Eddie allowed the detectives the opportunity to search the store. Obviously, whoever committed this murder, there would be a crime scene. They went downstairs, they searched the cellar, they looked all over, and they couldn't find any evidence that suggested that Mary had been killed there.
As they rule out the market, Mary's date appears from nowhere.
Chris just walked into the police department and said something to the effect of, "I think you guys are looking for me." And we interviewed him. That composite sketch was 100% accurate. You could put them up together, it was the same person. What was concerning to me was the fact that after this homicide was reported, it was all over the media. And the fact that that person didn't come forward to us, that was very important.
We're wary when he walks in the station right away that he is somehow connected to this, that he has had ample time to dispose of critical evidence, that he's had time to think about the whole process, to think about a story, to think about an alibi. You go into this hoping you could poke holes in his story.
He couldn't really provide a real reason for not coming forward. He also didn't go to work the next day. I remember looking into that and saying, well, this is odd. He didn't come forward for a couple of weeks, so we pressed him hard.
Chris eventually told us that he didn't make the appointment when he was supposed to. He was late. By the time he got to her house, she had left.
Chris tells police he then joined friends at another bar across the street from where Mary was dropped off.
Both bars were similar, maybe 50 yards from one another.
We confirmed his alibi by speaking with the friends that he was with that night, who corroborated that information. And in fact, he was with them, so he couldn't possibly have been where she was.
He also provided us an alibi as to where he spent the night that night, and we were able to find the person that he spent the night with. He was cleared as a suspect.
Knowing that he was a focus, a critical focus of this investigation, it is discouraging when you think you're angling for the right piece of the pie, and then suddenly, you get that ripped out from underneath you, and you realize, you have to regroup and go in a different direction. I mean, people were on edge. They talked about it in the schools and on the news, and it didn't matter if we were exhausted. It didn't matter if we had other things on our plate. But it became increasingly frustrating. The more information that we got, the more of kind of a question we had in the back of our heads as to who this suspect was. Were we ever going to get to the right person? Were we going to locate that person in time to prevent maybe another tragedy?
Chris then turns from suspect to critical witness.
Chris had seen Mary walking down Lake Avenue with another gentleman. Long, dark hair, kind of a chiseled complexion, in his 40s. And he remembers because Mary was wearing the hat that he recognized, the dark, wide-brimmed hat.
This matches the description of the man seen with Mary earlier that evening. More determined than ever, detectives renew their efforts with the media.
You never get tired of tips, especially on a whodunit. And this was truly a whodunit.
They get a break. A caller claims Mary was hanging out with a guy known only as Razor.
He told us that Razor would use a knife. And he was very skilled with it.
Police have a new person of interest. A man who goes by the name Razor.
Kind of ironic that he got the nickname of Razor and that he came in on a tip line when we're looking for somebody that had been involved in a dismemberment.
They bring in the man who phoned in the tip. His name is Josh.
Josh had told us that there was a party that both he and Razor were at. Both were competing for, Mary's affection, and at some point, she was obviously leaning towards Josh, more so than she was leaning towards Razor, if at all. Razor was apparently so upset that he located him that next day and assaulted and beat him up.
Detectives need to determine if Razor is the same dark-haired man last seen with Mary the night she died.
He was upset and had a connection to Mary. Mary kind of had an attraction to his friend instead of him. Maybe he has a criminal past. Those things kind of add up.
They head to Razor's last known location.
When he was in Concord, he was living in this tent on the river. I personally actually went to Concord and found his tent. We searched his campsite and surrounding areas, and we didn't find anything. No knives. No knives that were capable of causing this homicide.
This manner of disposing of a body, it seemed like it was a process, a very involved process, and that didn't fit his profile. He was a drifter, a transient who lived in a tent, doesn't have a vehicle, doesn't have the equipment needed. He doesn't have the means in order to commit this type of crime. In the end, he didn't fit the description of the person back in the bar.
With Razor ruled out, concern grows the case may go cold.
That was extremely frustrating because each time we developed information on another person, we were excited, we were getting there, we identified somebody, could this be it? And then suddenly we would speak to these individuals and we realized right away this is not the person we're looking for.
Months are going by and we couldn't lay her to rest.
It's gut-wrenching. When you're trying to solve this case, there's pressure from the family. They want answers, so you have an obligation to try to solve it as quick as you can and give them answers. We used every avenue that we could to hopefully try to solve it.
Then, they uncover a curious new lead. A second missing persons report.
We received a call late at night from a woman who identified herself as Donna Plick.
She hadn't seen her ex-husband, VAV Plick. Even though they were divorced, they still had a relationship where they would talk daily. Donna was somewhat nervous, but she was also concerned. She didn't know if something had happened to him.
VAV Plick was last seen in the early hours of July 22nd, 2 days after police found Mary Stetson.
When someone disappeared in and around the time of the murder or shortly thereafter, that is of great interest to find out where they went.
But what detectives learn next turns Vaclav from victim into potential suspect.
Vaclav was employed at a place nearby. It was described as a deboning factory.
He would debone chickens. He would cut up lamb legs and beef, and he would use a knife, and he was very skilled with it.
He was certainly capable of making the type of cuts that we had seen on the torso when we first discovered the body. Very clean, very precise cuts.
When Donna was interviewed, she indicated that he had a violent past. He had threatened that he could kill her and cut her up, and no one would ever know. Donna knew that he would frequent bars that were on Lake Ave, and that he would go fishing where the body was found.
Donna gives police a photo of her ex-husband.
One of our detectives that had originally gone out to these 2 drinking establishments and was asking around saw his photograph, and he was like, "You gotta be kidding me."
He had been inside the bar showing the picture of Mary Stetson around to see if anybody else had known Mary. And in fact, he had gone over to a table of males that were sitting together and had showed the picture. They didn't speak very good English, but they could communicate that they had never seen that woman before. The third male that was sitting there happened to be VAV Plick.
With Plick now the prime suspect, detectives return to the bar where Mary was last seen.
We completed a photo array, which included Vaclav. You know, our hope is to have somebody identify him in the bar.
We showed it around to the different patrons that were there, to the bartender, and they identified VAV Plick.
They need to determine what happened in the hours after Mary and Plick left the bar.
Well, we started canvassing the neighborhood where Donna showed us this apartment. And there was a neighbor that we spoke to that knew Vaclav.
She had seen Vaclav arrive at the apartment with a female who was similar in description to Mary on the night she disappeared. So when we initially came to the apartment, two of us entered through the common hallway in the front. One of the first things we saw was what appeared to be dark stains on the wall, leaving the front of the apartment outside the common hallway and heading towards the exterior door. The stains that we tested did test positive for the presence of human blood.
That gave us probable cause to get a search warrant. It was very interesting what we found in that apartment. When you first go in and just look, you wouldn't think that anything had happened there. Everything appeared normal.
And then as we looked in further, we determined that there was evidence that not only pointed to this Vaclav Plick as our guy, our suspect, but connected him right away to our victim.
On the bed was a rimmed hat. That's Mary's hat.
Not only that, there were several teddy bears inside that apartment. One in particular that was missing an eye.
All crime scenes are strange, but to see the hat sitting on a bed that was perfectly made, and to see this teddy bear without an eye was just, you know, here's the case.
Kind of made the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
Detectives have proof that Mary Stetson was inside Vaclav Plick's apartment the night she disappeared. Now they're looking for evidence of murder.
In his bedroom, the carpet was cut out.
I mean, that's consistent with something happening, something staining the carpet, and then the carpet having to be removed right away.
When someone's stabbing somebody, the blood is casting off.
And clearly, people who clean up crime scenes forget the fact that there's other manners in which to collect evidence or visually see evidence.
You turn out all the lights, and you spray this chemical luminol, and it luminesces blood with like a black light, and that area lit up like a Christmas tree. There was blood on the bedspread. There was blood on the heater leading to the hallway. You could see there was an enormous amount of blood that was there. There was blood in the bathtub. At the last phase, it kind of tells you a story. This is where he cut her up in the bathroom. You understand the human cost of what that means, but as an investigator, it's another little piece of evidence, because at the end of the day, you're trying to convict this person and put him away for the rest of his life.
After a nationwide manhunt, they ambush Vaclav Plick outside a gas station in Austin, Texas.
We didn't know if he was armed. We knew certainly what he was capable of. So we waited outside, and I pretended I was pumping gas, and as he walked out, we grabbed him and arrested him.
I was so happy and relieved because this man was caught and he wouldn't be able to do it again to some other woman.
As they grill Plick for a confession, they now have a complete timeline of what happened the night Mary died.
Mary left her apartment about 5:45. She traveled in a cab to a local bar. There, she met with Vaclav. They had some drinks at this bar, and he purchased a teddy bear for her. They then left that bar and headed back towards Vaclav's apartment on Orange Street. And that he tried maybe having sex with her, and she didn't want to. And an argument ensued, and he ended up violently stabbing her to death. In a panic, he didn't know what to do, so he dismembered her so he could get her out of the apartment. He used a miter saw that was in his closet, and he put the torso in a large duffel bag, and he threw her in the area that he fished at the trestle. He then took the other body parts and drove out to the total opposite side of the city and discarded them in the woods.
I had an opportunity to be very close to this person, this level of evil that I don't think I've ever been as close to in the past.
With the information that he provided about what he had done with the torso and the body parts, Manchester police conducted another search, and we were able to find her head on one side of the street and some of her extremities on the other. I think it was very important to the family that we recovered her head especially. They were able to give her a proper burial, and I think that was very, very important.
She raised us, and he took that away. He just completely destroyed a family.
On November 14th, 2000, Vaclav Plick is convicted of Mary Stetson's murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole.
I just remember when the verdict came back guilty, how emotional it was, even for me. And I turned, and Tamara was there, and we embraced each other and cried.
It was a relief. I gave Mark a big hug because they worked hard. And it was finally ended. And I was kind of happy. Justice was served.